You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and work experts. We talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at, what they do every day, and what they see coming next for the future of work. Hope you enjoy.
Good morning, y'all. Michael, welcome to the Modern People Leader.
Thanks a bunch, fellas. Excited to be here.
So nice to have you. It's a beautiful day in Austin, Texas. You're not too far from where our MPL HQ is. In Austin, you're in Dallas, Texas. So
right up 35 from you guys.
Right
Happy
up
St.
30.
Patrick's Day, by the way.
Oh, how was the big festival this past weekend?
Didn't have a chance to go. Was admittedly traveling
Smart.
like really the last couple of weeks. So it was nice to just be at home this weekend and have a harp and just listen to some Irish music and just hang out. So
Yeah, someone over the weekend was like, "Oh yeah, I was live streaming this thing in Dallas, like this parade," and I was like, "That's not just that is like one of the biggest things in Dallas." Yeah. So
given I'm from Chicago, though, fellas, like that's to me that is like a St. Patty's Day parade. Like having experienced the one here in Dallas, like it's good, but you can't ever beat Dying the River Green and being right there in the city of Chicago.
you can't compete with that. Yeah.
No.
And I just realized none of us are wearing green, so like a virtual pinch to all of us because Daniel, we're going to the airport later, so we got to fix that. So, well. Every episode we kick off the same way, Michael. It's a tradition we call Good News Stories. We share a personal or a work-related story from the last couple of weeks just to kick things off, like feel-good vibes. We prefer for our guests to go first. So if you don't mind kicking us off, that would be great.
Yeah, would love to. Tons of good news in my last couple of weeks. I was actually going to go the personal route with this one, just thinking about this question from you guys a little bit in advance. So my wife and I, it was a goal of ours this year to do some more international travel. I travel all the time for work, but it was like the last couple of years we haven't really done a whole lot of international travel, so this was a focus for us. So this weekend we just booked our 10-year wedding anniversary trip. We're going to go here in June down to Cancun and just spend a couple of days celebrating 10 years being married, and then also later this year we're going to do a trip over to Italy and Switzerland. Ooh. Which is really exciting for me because I studied abroad 20 years ago in Italy. I haven't been back since, so I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, really good news, getting to book some international travel and spend some time with Melanie, my wife.
You want to go next, Stephen, or you want me to take it?
You go next. I actually don't have mine. We were just talking about how I just roll up and share. So yeah, Daniel, take it.
Okay, I can go. So I have two personal good news stories, and if I can fit it in, one word good news story. So I'll try to go fast. On the personal front, completed my first ever High Rocks competition this past weekend, which was way harder than I expected it to be. I guess I have I don't know. I go into these things maybe a little bit overconfident in my ability. Like, for example, the first time I ever tried playing tennis was with Steven, and I thought I could just show up and be good at tennis immediately. And I had a similar feeling about High Rocks, but it humbled me for sure. And I think Stephen said this to me. Sometimes it's nice to remind yourself that you can do hard things. And so I'm proud that I finished it. Didn't have the best time, but I finished it. We're also 8 weeks out from my baby's due date. So I feel like that's going to be here tomorrow. I mean, the last 8 weeks oh my God, it's March 17th. Like January 1st feels like it was yesterday. And so that's exciting. And then on the work front, we're going to be at Transform this week. That's like the big family reunion, feels like a 10-year school anniversary. Like everybody's coming together and you're seeing a lot of familiar faces from the podcast, from LinkedIn. And so it's going to be a busy week, but I'm excited.
Yeah, it is going to be a busy week, and congrats on High Rocks. That's huge.
Super cool.
I have a huge admiration for anyone that takes on a big challenge or just putting yourself out of your comfort zone, whether it's work related or personal challenges and goals that you have, traveling. Life's busy and it's running a business is stressful. And so just anyone that can find the time to do these things that you put in your, these goals that you're setting, I really respect that. So kudos to you, Daniel.
Thank you.
I don't have any personal that's going to beat all of that. So I'm going to go work today. And it's March 17th. Obviously, everyone will be hearing this a week or two later, but we're near the quarter end. And I don't know where Q1 2025 went. It just, to Daniel's point, I feel like it was just New Year's. And so to think that we've almost have a quarter behind us already in this year is exhilarating. But for any go-to-market executive or employee out there, it's extremely stressful as well, because you're like, shit, we had a target, and how do we do? And so I take on the role of program managing our quarterly retros and our quarterly planning. So we do a look back, and at the same time we look forward, and we're pretty rigorous about doing that. For a 2-person company, it might be a little overboard, honestly, but I believe in the rigor of these kind of business rituals. And the great news is business looks great. We made a lot of changes toward the end of last year. I joined the podcast full time. And so this is the first look at our business with both of us hitting the expense line items and revenue coming in, having to offset much higher expense with 2 salaries now. And things look great. I forget, being an operator is extremely stressful, because when I say great, anyone else would probably look at the numbers and be like, what? Why are you guys living this way? You should not. Come on. But it's not my first rodeo. And having done this for over a decade, like, I know when the numbers look good and when they don't, and the numbers look really good. And so kudos to us for a strong Q1. And I'm looking, it's not over yet. And what a place like Transform to wrap things up for the first quarter. So I am excited about that as well. So with that said, this is not about the modern people leader and how we're performing. Michael, you have a fascinating story. And in addition to that, you're doing some fascinating work at Cariloop, one that like really resonates. When Daniel and I take pods of this kind of format, we really look to have conversations that like we can personally relate to. And I'm super excited about today's chat because we personally really relate to the work you're doing at Cariloop. And so I call this a Brené Brown question. Like, what's your story? Like, walk us through your journey and how that led to you founding Cariloop.
Yeah, first of all, fellas, thanks for having me. And Stephen, I really appreciate the words, as we're going to hopefully chat a bunch about here over the next hour. Like, everybody's going through something like this. I would hope that the story here is personally relatable to just about everybody out there. If you're someone who has anybody in your life that you care about, every one of us is going to get that phone call at some point that something's up and something's going on. Or Daniel, in your case, you've got a little one that you're expecting here coming soon that you're going to welcome into your home. I mean, this is just life. And this is exactly what happened to me and my family. I can't believe it's been 17 years since it happened. That sent me and my co-founder down this journey of starting Cariloop and working to build something that we felt like could really make a difference in a lot of working caregivers and families' lives. I'll try to keep it brief. I mean, it's a long story. It's an 8-year story. In 2008, about a year after I had graduated from college, I went to Purdue. I studied business, finance, economics. I started my career in the management consulting space. 2008, this is the year that the global economy is wrecked. You've got a financial meltdown going on. You've got tons of layoffs. You've got just global turbulence, really, from all of this. And my firm at the time, had gone through some pretty significant reductions in force, budgets being cut with all of our clients. So it was a pretty stressful time. I was fortunate to still have my job. A year into my professional career, it was a lot of learnings as far as kind of what happens in corporate America when you run into tough macroeconomic times. Right as this was going on, guys, like Stephen, just to your exact point a minute ago, my grandfather on my mom's side of my family got really sick, had a form of a brain aneurysm, essentially, that ended up causing all sorts of issues with his kidneys and his heart and his lungs. And I mean, he was in and out of the hospital. Like I mentioned, it was about 8-9 years. every time I saw my grandfather at holidays, like we sort of thought this was the last time we'll see him. And so when this happens, my mom, who had been staying at home with my 3 younger siblings who are 9, 10, and 11 years younger than I am, like now my mom has to be in Michigan to help my grandmother take care of my grandfather. My dad is working 60, 70, 80 hours a week for our family business to support the family. So for about 2 years there, like the first 2 years of all this, in the middle of this financial crisis, being told from my employer that I need to be north of 100% chargeable. I get no raise, I get no bonus. I'm lucky to just have my job in this environment. In the middle of all that going on, I've got this going on with my family, and it was hard. I mean, hard to even describe it. I mean, that's the easiest word to come up with. Just really complicated. I gained a bunch of weight. I didn't notice this or discover this until years later, that I probably went through a period of depression. Didn't know it in the moment, but certainly years later, as I've learned, I've come to sort of recognize it. Just a really tough time for my family. And this was sort of my first introduction, guys, into what just about every one of us is dealing with, right? Like you find out something's going on with a family member, you're doing your best to keep all the plates spinning, your work, your family, your friends, your personal life, all this, right? And absolutely, like what happened with my grandfather was impacting my work. And so this is what really sort of inspired me and my co-founder, who went through something very similar with his father-in-law. We were a couple of young 20-somethings and said, why don't we work on something that we think can maybe play a role in helping some of these families navigate some of these challenges. And at the time, we were only focused on sort of adult and elder care. And as we'll get into, this is expanded sort of to include the whole scope and whole array of caregiving situations, from thinking about having a child and planning for your family, Daniel, all the way through you've got something going on with a parent or a grandparent or an in-law that maybe is near end of life. So just incredible, Cariloop's going to turn 13 years old this year. What a ride it's been, getting to help so many families go through what it sounds like all 3 of us either have gone through or are going through, and to get to partner with all these incredible employers and organizations and brands around the country and the world to play a role in their cultural strategies and really to improve their benefits ecosystem. Pinch me, guys. It's just been amazing. So I love what I get to get up and do every day, and I'm really excited to be here to chat with you guys about it.
Yeah, I feel like this is super relevant. Steven, I don't know if you want to share your experience the last few months, but Steven, I'll let you speak. I'm not going to tell the story for you.
Yeah, no, I relate to this topic very much. So I wasn't just saying that as like an intro to the podcast. What Daniel's referring to is in November, I entered into my first kind of, apart from being a father to my 2 daughters, my first caregiving arrangement. And it's not one of my parents, and it's not an in-law. Interestingly enough, it is my aunt, my 93-year-old aunt, who is a retired nun and has no family to take care of her, to give her the care that she needs. And through 2 years of conversations with my dad, and hearing him describe this property, I guess, will and estate type of issues that he was trying to figure out. He didn't ask for my help, but he just kept talking about this kind of family estate thing and how he believes he is the owner of a house. And my dad is, he's 83, so he's progressing into the latter stages of his life. And I was just like, Dad, what you're describing to me makes absolutely no sense. And I dug deeper. And finally, I just drove down to South Texas, which is where my aunt and where she lives, and where my dad was visiting her probably 3 or 4 times a year. And long story short, over the course of 6 months, figured out that after all of this investigative work, it was really my aunt that needed care, and my dad isn't able to provide her with the care that she needs. And I think all of the issues and confusion were a manifestation of this recognition, like, oh, wow, my sister needs help. I can't help her and I don't know what to do. Because as soon as I got involved and I realized like her name is Benny, like Benny, this is not a safe situation for her. We've got like someone needs to come in and do things. Like if there isn't a plan, I am willing to help with this. And so that's how I took over the caregiving responsibilities. And it took a break-in into the house. Like it was not ideal. And when Daniel and I kind of debriefed on it, my realization was like, okay, at the end of the day, like everyone is safe. Apart from some property loss, like everything has been dealt with and handled so far, right? The real work is now going to begin as I serve in this kind of capacity for my aunt. But think of all the permutations of all the things that could happen. Mine was super random, and you begin to really feel for people. And these are kind of silent things that are happening that no one's talking about. My dad was silent about his issue, if we consider him the original caregiver. And I can't imagine some of the things that are happening out there, some of the challenges that families are having to face. And so for me, that's why I really relate to this topic. And agree, like we should be doing more. Fortunately, I am my own boss. So like it's easy for me. And once a quarter, I drive down to South Texas. But what that means is like, I've got to take that Friday off and I need to be out of Austin by like 10:30, 11 a.m. So I've got daytime to go help my aunt go to the courthouse or talk to her attorney or handle whatever matter. You can't do that on the weekend, especially not in South Texas. So I'm privileged to have the flexibility I have. And I know that is the minority of the cases out there.
Yeah, especially in this environment, right? Like there's so much conversation amongst people leadership, executive leadership around return to office and being back in your facility 3, 4, 5 days a week. And like, I think there's also been this unwinding of some of these flexibility policies and procedures that have existed sort of post-pandemic. And it's getting even harder, guys, to sort of navigate everything, Stephen, you just described when you're expected to be back in the office as much as you are. And yeah, like I think what a lot of people don't realize if you've never been down this path before is just, I love what you said a second ago, just all the combinations and permutations of how this could go. And it just sort of unlocks all of this, and you have it's just this endless maze, right? Like all you know is your aunt is not well, and all you know is your dad is struggling to provide care and support your aunt. Like that's fact, but everything else after that, it's just a giant web of unknown. And trying to figure that out, like it takes real time, real effort, real money. And that was what inspired all of this. So yeah, I thank you for doing what you're doing, I guess is my long way of saying, like, appreciate that.
And I feel like that's the perfect segue into just getting a quick description of what Cariloop does. It sounds like you help with this. How did you just put it? Like help figure out like this web of unknown?
Yeah, like we tend to describe this period as like it's care chaos, right? Like there's this cloud that you're sort of trying to navigate through when you figure out like all you know is you got someone you care about, but how you're going to go about getting from point A to point B or from the beginning to end, it's just really difficult. So we partner, I mean, there's a whole story here again, like from the founding story of Cariloop to now, like so much has happened. Like we could spend an entire hour just talking about all the pivots and all the lessons and learnings of like starting the business and like going to market with that first product and all the things that happened. But if you were to sort of stand back now and talk about kind of where we are, where we're going, we partner with some of our country's best and largest employers, insurance companies, PEOs, like really primarily focused in the B2B space to provide what we call the world's first caregiver support platform, which is this really sort of modern and seamless digital and concierge solution that helps working caregivers and parents, like the three of us are talking about here, navigate all of these complicated health, medical, financial, legal decisions that you're making as you're taking care of somebody. So founded the company in 2012. We turned 13 years old this year. We've got about 200 corporate clients, just about 2 million eligible employee lives that have access to Cariloop now. And just been incredible to see, again, the impact that we've had and the data that we've been collecting, which is, I know, a topic we're going to chat a bit about today.
Yeah, I mean, we could fill an hour, and Daniel has a separate podcast idea. I think he had the idea as we were launching the Modern People Leader of interviewing founders and just talking. Like, both of us are so fascinated by like all of that. Yeah, but unfortunately, that we're gonna have to save that one for the other podcast we launch maybe someday. But for today, I want to go back to a comment you made a little while ago about flexibility that we saw a few years ago not being there anymore. My words, not yours. And we've certainly seen it. I mean, you can't operate in the HR space without knowing this is a hard truth, that the pendulum has swung from an employee friendly market to an employer friendly market, as is often the case with economic downturns or challenges. And there's a lot of confusion, a lot of frustration, a lack of clarity as far as like where this is all going. And so today we want to bring back a segment that we haven't done in a few months. We used to do all the time because things were changing so frequently, and we call it the State of the Union of Work. Obviously, this is more the State of the Union on caregiving, but you mentioned data. I want to hear from you. What does the data say in terms of where we're at? We talk to HR leaders every single week, multiple times a week. This week, in fact, we'll probably talk to 50. And we know that this topic is relevant and it hits close to home for a lot of HR leaders. And so if I am a head of HR or someone in HR that's responsible for dealing with these types of employee issues, like, what should I make of the current market? Like, where are we at? And what does the data say in terms of like where things are going?
It's same. We could spend an hour just on this question, Stephen. Like, seriously, I say to our head of people all the time, like, thank you. Because it is just so complicated to be a head of people in HR these days. And especially if you sort of zoom out and you think about what that's been like over the last 3, 4, 5 years, the amount of change and change management that HR and people leaders have had to deal with, as it specifically relates to kind of the state of the state on caregiving. One of the things that we wanted to do, and this is part of what sort of created the inspiration for the three of us to have this conversation. Cariloop is just about to release like our very first top needs report, we're calling it. And just to double click into this, like over the course of the last now 10, 12 years, as we've been working with employers and working caregivers and parents, we've collected a lot of data. And there's a lot of interesting trends that you can sort of decipher and analyze over the last couple of years that working caregivers and parents have dealt with as they've been navigating these journeys. So first of all, like the question might be like, well, kind of why do this needs report? Well, I mean, we're getting asked all the time for all this data. Like I sort of compare it to the federal government turning to ADP for payroll data. Like we're getting a lot of inbound from researchers, universities, insurance companies, the media, prospects, clients, partners, like all these different stakeholder groups that are just trying to understand, Stephen, the exact question you just asked, like what is going on? And rather than us being so kind of reactive to these questions, we figured we'd finally get in front of it and just do some internal projects related to like, what are we seeing? And speak with our care coaches and care team who work on the front lines with all of these caregivers and parents and try our best to summarize this in a 15, 20 page report and draw some interesting nuggets and parallels to some of the research that's coming out based on what we're seeing versus what they're seeing. So the headline here, guys, the state of the state, it is really hard to be a parent and caregiver right now. That's not probably a surprising statement to you guys or your audience. You think about sort of what it's like to be in the workplace nowadays and to find out that you have a kiddo that's just been diagnosed pre-autistic, or to have a parent that's just been diagnosed with cancer or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. And that sort of unlocking mechanism, Stephen, we just talked about, of all the things that you're going to have to sort of figure out and navigate, while at the same time operating in an environment where you're expected to be in the office 4 or 5 days a week. If you're in the consulting world or professional services world and you're billing based on hours and time, like to keep your production levels as high as they need to be, or to be turning your projects in on time in an environment where potentially you don't have the flexibility or the privilege that the three of us just talked about. I'm not sure how, like without some of the things that we're out there advocating for it, we're not sure how you do it. So we can double click into all this, but man, it's really difficult. That's the headline to be a parent and a caregiver right now. And the data that we're collecting and that we're showcasing in this report, it really does validate and highlight a lot of these issues. And we can go into a bunch of these here in the next couple, the next like 15, 20 minutes. Like it's just really tough.
Stephen was telling me when he had his first Astrid back, I guess she's what, 15 years old now, or 14, 15, that he came back from paternity leave and he asked the entire team, like, why didn't anybody tell me that it was this fucking hard? Like, everybody just started cracking up. And that's what I was thinking about as you were describing, how hard it is to be a caregiver today. And I feel like for the most part, it wasn't really talked about in the workplace. And so
it never is.
Yeah.
It never is. Like, I mean, this is part of the problem, right? Is like HR and benefits and people leaders tend to form strategy and tactics mostly and many of them, they're empaths. They form these points of view based on the feedback of their teams and their people. Well, if no one's talking about it, then how are you supposed to solve it, right?
Yeah.
It's a massive problem, Daniel, for sure. Didn't mean to cut you off, but like I get really passionate about this. Like, why are we not talking about it?
Yeah, and I feel like Stephen just has the personality that he's going to be the one that will just like say it. And I feel like most people will just silently suffer and struggle through early parenthood or struggle through taking care of their aunt who lives 3.5 hours away and doesn't have any other family. And so it feels like we're making some progress and we're talking about it a little bit more. Why do you think it's taken so long for employers to realize like why this is so important and why it should be almost their responsibility to help their employees?
Something the two of you need to know about me is I am naturally an optimist. And so I always see the world like through the lens of someone who's hopeful and someone who's positive and excited about the future. And so, Daniel, I will say, like what you just said a second ago is true. We are making progress, which I'm very proud of. I feel like we've played hopefully a small role in that. Specifically thinking back to like 10, 12 years ago when we started, like the amount of progress we've made since. So I'm seeing good things. However, you're right in that many conversations we're still having with employers and people leaders tend to reveal that there's one of a number of challenges that sort of stand between their ability to properly support caregivers and their folks' ability to be able to really show up and perform and climb the career ladder and excel in their lives and their careers because of it. We just touched on a big part of the issue, the stigma that is attached to caring for someone. Many folks not wanting to openly admit that there's something going on. I think there's a lot of employers as well in our country that they have sort of a different view of their role as the employer in providing certain benefits and programs to their people versus maybe not feeling a sense of responsibility. Like, so they'll provide maybe core benefits, health and medical and dental and vision, but they sort of feel like anything else on top of this is up to the employee. We live in a world where benefits and programs are expensive. So if budgets are tight, especially like they are right now, like there's just some concern around, okay, how do I justify this expense or this investment? It's interesting. We sit down with a lot of these folks and you can, within the first 5-10 minutes of a conversation, like we'll ask them, like, have you ever been down this path before? And ironically, they'll be very open, just like the three of us are, about their experiences. But then as soon as you start to talk to them about what their employees might be going through, they tend to kind of opt for more of a reactive approach versus a proactive one. They'd rather just sort of put the fire out when they see that there's a fire versus getting out in front of it before it becomes a problem. And lastly, I'd also comment there's definitely a generational shift going on with how millennials and Gen Z sort of think about turning to solutions that their employer might offer for things like mental health and caregiving and family support versus potentially, Gen X or baby boomers. And so I think employers are still even trying to get their arms a little bit around this as they're trying to manage sort of each of the generations that they have within their workforce and how to create something that's truly inclusive. So lots of challenges, but that said, I am seeing progress. I am seeing more awareness. I am seeing more empathy. I am seeing more sort of seeking first to understand by HR and people leaders and executive managers, like looking at their folks. And maybe part of that is that they've recently gone through this themselves. And it sort of gets them a little bit more open to the possibilities and the struggles of what their folks might be going through. But proud of what I'm seeing, but still, we've got work to do. I mentioned we're coming up on 2 million eligible employees. There's 150, 160 million employees in the labor force in the United States. We got work to do, guys. So excited about the progress. Still more work to do here.
And so when I think about companies, and I was very fortunate. So I've been in the workforce this year. Wow, 25 years. I'm dating myself for sure. And for the first 12 years of my career, I worked in the corporate world. So I was a consultant at Ernst & Young. And so when you say things about like billable hours and utilization, it's like and meeting kind of hitting the percentages that the company has established for promotion and yada, 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 like all that, like it still feels really real to me. And then I jumped ship to go work for one of my clients, which was a big bank, Goldman Sachs. Both of those places had great benefits. They were progressive, at least in the external kind of marketing of these programs and internally for the most part. When I think about this conversation, though, it feels like it is cultural. To some degree, it ties back to the culture of a company and like what sort of company, what do we want to be known for? And how are we going to win? How are we going to employ the best people?
Right.
And one of the things that keeps me up is it feels like there's a cultural battle going on right now, a war of sorts within kind of the business world. And the war is like, essentially, we owe this to our people is like one faction. I sit in that faction. On the other side, you've got this is employment at will, like take it or leave it. These are things that for decades and decades and decades that people have just figured out that they can just figure it out. And so what in the conversations that you're having, do you see, does this kind of cultural war, does that relate? Or, is this just us in podcasting world seeing this stuff? And what is usually the tipping point? Because I'm sure you've seen it. You've seen the company go from like, you know what, this just isn't a priority. We don't think we're going to have budget for something like this. Like, talk to you another time, only to come back and say, actually, one of our executives, someone wants to learn more. How quickly can you get me that overview? And what are some of the things that you're noticing in terms of the companies that are like, yeah, okay, we may have been in the like just figure it out camp, but now we're shifting and we got to do this, and this is a priority. Like, what is that? Is there a moment that these companies are having? What is that tipping point?
I would tell you, Stephen, that moment actually already happened for many companies, and that moment was July 3rd of 2020. And on that day, it was, for us anyway, I'm just judging this based on our own data and our own experience, but I have to imagine even other benefit providers or other vendors in the space saw similar. Like, this was the day that, it's about 3 months-ish, 4 months-ish from when the world shut down. And this was sort of the moment when they realized that things aren't going back to normal. Schools aren't going to open. We've got to sort of really change the way we think about our workforce cultures and our accommodations for our employees and those working caregivers and parents. And it sent ripple effects through, I think, the entire workforce and all of people leadership and executive management, like ever since. And so, like you're talking about that moment, there's still those more pragmatic employers that we sit down and talk with, and they need to see the data. They need to sort of understand the parallels to how supporting their working parents and caregivers is going to translate into ROI and value. Thankfully, we're to a place now that we can have that conversation. Whereas, years and years ago, when we started the business, we didn't have the data. We couldn't really engage in that dialogue. So no matter sort of which way this goes, like you're going to have those employers that there's personal experience on HR, there's personal experience in the C-suite. Like you're right, Stephen. This is cultural. This is like just part of their core value set. This is what the company wants to be known for, what they want to stand for. There's going to be those types of groups, and then there's going to be the types of groups that need to see every data point sort of down to the bit and byte of how this works. And it's our responsibility to be able to show that to them. And so like, I'm really proud of the fact that we can have either discussion now. And I would much prefer it that we don't have to require something like this, to be part of the cultural solution. I wish everybody would sort of just be able to realize it on their own. And again, thankfully, we can have the discussion no matter what. I tend to be more in the camp, Stephen, you are, where like I'm an employer too. Like we've got a team of 120. And I'm thinking about what these policies and principles have meant for us as a business and why it's so important to support these parents and caregivers here at Cariloop and the performance boost that we've seen, the retention boost that we've seen as a result of it. So I see it firsthand. I see the data. Like I'm convinced in either camp, in either case. It's been a real interesting challenge to sort of figure out which camp each employer is in and sort of meet them where they're at.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of the data, let's go back to the top needs report. Like, what are you seeing in the data? What are some of the top concerns for caregivers right now?
Yeah, I mean, and there's so much data my team gave me to prepare for this. Like, if I were to sort of like summarize sort of the three big areas for caregivers right now: financial strain, navigating complex care systems, and emotional burnout. And so, just to kind of double click into each of these, and Stephen, I mean, maybe just think about even what you shared with me about your aunt, and what's coming for you and your dad and your family as a result. The out-of-pocket costs in today's healthcare system, with deductibles rising, networks narrowing, sort of all the challenges as far as a medical cost standpoint, like that's a big enough problem as it is. Then you layer on top of it all of the concerns around long-term care costs, both for facility-based and home-based care, like rising significantly over the last, call it decade, and projected to continue to rise at the same rate. Like it's just really expensive to go down this path. And if you have to leave your job, leave your post at your company to go and do this, that's going to further compound this strain. So now you're seeing caregivers and parents burn their 401ks and retirement savings to go and like actively be a caregiver for a level. Like it's constant. And so that was already there, but our data is showing that this is actually accelerating. This is starting to get worse. So this is absolutely something that employers need to keep, front and center. Navigating care systems, I would tell you that about half of what our care coaches and resource coordinators spend time doing is just helping families find providers and resources and services for their loved ones. So there's sort of two sides to this coin. If you're in an urban area, there's so many choices. It's analysis paralysis. Like, how do I pick the one that's right for me and my family? Versus if I'm out in the burbs,
looking for daycare options.
How do I pick the right one out of 100 or 200, within 5 miles of me? But then you have the opposite problem out in rural America or in the suburbs where there's a severe lack of supply. So just trying to navigate all this and make the right decisions that also are in network for your insurance, or if it's a aging or geriatric situation, something that's in network for Medicare or Medicare Advantage. Really, really challenging for caregivers. And we're seeing this in the data. And then this is something that, again, it seems obvious, but it was a bit surprising to even understand the extent by which it has reached these peaks and levels, is the burnout and mental health issues that caregivers are facing. So just put those even two previous things in context of what this is like to, I'll use the example of Stephen and I back in the management consulting world and bill hours. Like, how are you supposed to keep your production and your hours at work high and go solve all these things at the same time? I mean, it's just this juggling act. And so that is leading to really sharp increases in the amount of burnout that parents and caregivers are feeling. I think actually it was just this past year that the Surgeon General released a report talking about, I don't know if you fellows saw this, talking about just the tremendous burden and mental health toll that parenting, like just the act of raising your child, like every single day, parenting, like just the toll that it's taking on our society. So these are three areas that like we're really honing in on and spending a lot of time speaking to our employer clients and partners about that. If you don't get in front of some of these things, it is absolutely going to affect your production levels and your overall revenue and profitability.
When you start working with clients, like I'm just curious, like what does the data say around like what I guess I'm curious is like what is the gap that we're trying to overcome in terms of getting to a world that is more like the camp that we sit in, where this is a responsibility. Like if we have to do something to support our employees with caregiving. And I don't spend a lot of time in this world, so I'm just curious, like what is an average company, what are they providing, and what resources does a typical employee have versus like a Cariloop type client? What do they have access to? I'm just curious in terms of like what the norm is, so to speak, and what is possible.
The norm is an employer offering your standard core benefits, and those benefits being uniquely fitted for you as the employee who may be the patient. So if I have something going on with me, and if I'm lucky, if I have something going on with my spouse or my dependents, my employer offers some sort of coverage to support me with those issues.
Those specific issues.
I've got a surgery I've got to have. I've gotten sick and I need to go to the doctor. My spouse has gotten sick. My children are sick. Like some of the basic sort of medical, dental, vision benefits that we talk about. Like the employer has taken it as far as to provide them for mostly you. Where that line stops and where we've got to sort of get folks to move the goalpost is we need to stop thinking about benefits only catering to the employee as the patient. What about the employee as the caregiver of the patient? And it opens up this whole other universe that many employers just have yet to really go explore. And to us, this is really the next generation of well-being benefits, is thinking through that for your employees and solving it. So I think that's, Stephen, it's a big question, but most employers, I think, have found that they provide the basics. Where we'd love them to take a big step forward is to sort of look beyond what they're providing and recognize that you've got good coverage for your folks as patients, but you're missing this whole area of what happens when they're caregivers.
Just curious, how does the U.S. compare to other countries when it comes to this? Are there any more progressive countries out there that are thinking about the caregiver more, or is this something that's being ignored across the board?
Just about every other country globally is further along on this front than we are.
Not surprised.
And again, just to take it back to me being positive and optimistic, we're making good progress. But if you were to go examine even leave and disability programs around the world and compare what we offer to caregivers, parents, and our employees here in the US versus in places in the EU or in Australia or pretty much anywhere around the world, you'll find that our programs are really limited. In fact, in some cases, non-existent relative to everybody else. So there's a lot of work to do to catch back up. Now, like the counterpoint to this is that, well, here in America, we are very focused on capitalism and productivity and some of these metrics that we really want to lead the world in. And so this would be the argument from executive leaders and HR leaders is like, how do you sort of do both? I always sort of challenge folks to look at both of these data points and try to find the middle of the Venn diagram and show how they actually are symbiotic in nature. They're not sort of counterpoints, like they actually support one another. That by supporting and taking good care of your working caregivers and parents, this is actually how you can maximize your productivity levels and your economic metrics. They don't work against each other, they work with each other. So this could be a whole conversation of itself. It's like the US versus the rest of the world. We've got a lot of catching up to do still, Daniel.
Yeah, not surprised to hear that. Something else that caught my eye in the report was that it paints a picture of two very different realities. Families who have that support and those who don't. And for many, caregiving is not just emotionally exhausting, but financially crippling. And I'm 8 weeks out, exactly 8 weeks out from being a first-time parent. And yeah, it's tough to find affordable childcare. We're probably going to have the grandmas. My mom's probably going to listen to this and be very happy to hear this, but we're going to be leaning on my mom a lot, on Tori's mom a lot, and then have like some sort of flexible arrangement at whatever childcare option or daycare we end up selecting. And I'm just curious, like, what's driving the costs up, whether it's childcare or elder care, and why is it so hard to find like that quality care right now?
It's a very common thing we see across our member base, especially those that we're working with on the peds and childcare side of the house, is that many of these caregivers and parents are turning to like what we would refer to as their personal networks, Daniel, for caregiving and for support. I mean, no different than even Stephen's talking about with your dad and your aunt, right? Like it's the same thing. And you hit the nail on the head as far as the challenge is it's so expensive to go out of pocket. And by the way, that's exactly what it is. It's out of pocket. It's not like any of this is covered by anything that you would have from an insurance or benefit standpoint. Like this is all on you. It goes back to sort of the problem I mentioned before with, out of pocket costs and just the financial well-being deterioration that we're seeing. You kind of have the perfect storm of things going on, specifically in childcare. The same applies on the elder care side as well. But on the childcare side, you've got like really depleted levels of supply because of increasing levels of inflation, higher overhead costs, higher labor costs. You've got a lot of local, state, regional, and federal subsidy programs and credit programs that were there during the pandemic and have now expired, which a lot of these childcare facilities or center-based care facilities, like they relied on, these dollars to be able to operate. Then on the flip side of this, you've got like this really sort of ramping of demand, especially in urban areas like you're talking about, where everybody's expected back in the office. You've got all this employment growth in certain pockets of the country. Like, you guys are both in Austin. Austin has just been on fire the last 5-6 years, right? As everybody has been moving from places like New York and California, like there's only so much supply to go around. And if the demand is going to continue to go up, like both of these factors are pushing costs up, up, up. And so what I would say is this has also been a big part of our strategy. Having access to marketplaces, like it sounds like you're searching through to find options, like that's great. It's helpful. It can at least kind of get you started. You can kick the tires and see what's out there. But where we've seen the difference in outcomes is having someone join your team, like one of our care coaches come with you, Daniel, and work with you guys to sort of sift through this and figure this out. Like the difference between a really positive outcome where you found high quality, affordable childcare and it was in place for a long period of time, there's a much higher success rate for those folks versus trying to do this on your own. And I'm sure that's not going to surprise you given kind of where you're at 8 weeks out.
I mean, we're on Google and asking friends. That's our that's the marketplace. I don't even know. I mean, I'm sure there are marketplaces out there that I could be looking on, but that's the extent of what we're doing.
Having a care coach who's a social worker or a nurse or a therapist or a counselor or someone that's like coming from this background, not just childcare, but adult care as well, like go and do a lot of that shopping for you, make those phone calls, do the research and come to you with options that really do fit like you and your family's needs. Like that is a huge change maker in terms of how this experience can and should go. So yeah, perfect storm on the expense side of things. Like, and my hope is that we're going to continue to see over the next couple of years more and more folks like hopefully come into the field. But if you were to look at the macroeconomic backdrop here, we've got some headwind coming up. So this is going to continue to be an issue.
I have a rolling reminder in my calendar every 2 weeks to call the assisted living, the top choice that my aunt has that is church related. She's a retired nun, so having that spiritual component is really, really important to her. So she has this very specific view of what she wants. And my view is like, I'm here to help provide you with as close to what you're looking for as we can find so that you can thrive. Because I honestly believe that like everyone deserves that. Everyone deserves a kind of like last phase of their life, just like be happy, enjoy the things, have the things you want and the type of community that you're looking for. And so because of that, that's obviously not the easiest solution. The easiest solution would be like, Thea, here are your 3 options. You're just going to have to choose one of these options. But because I want to choose what's right for her, I have this recurring reminder to call and check, even though I know no one's going to pick up the phone. I'm going to leave a voicemail and then I'm going to send an email. I'm probably not going to hear back. But this is what I'm going to do. And because I feel like I have to do it. And so it's just like, again, I can't say enough how much I relate to this conversation, because having someone to help facilitate that, to not, and like, I'll wake up at like 6 a.m, like, oh shit, I forgot to do such and such. And it's like, this isn't even like for my life or for my immediate family. But now it's like reached that level of anxiety where like, I'm just spontaneously waking up in the morning, like I got to do this. And so unfortunately we're running out of time. How these hours go by so quickly will never cease to amaze me, because this has just been such a fun conversation. So if I kind of reflect on the chat we've had, the data is supporting that this problem is getting bigger. This challenge, this caregiving challenge and burden is getting bigger. The costs continue to escalate. Like there are forces, a lot of forces that are at play, and that caregiving is no longer a private family matter. That's an outdated way of looking at this problem. And I'm sure like the younger generations are having a lot to do in terms of driving that kind of change in perception. And so for the people leaders listening today, I can't imagine that our audience doesn't relate to this, that anyone doesn't relate to this topic. So for those individuals that want to do something for their workforce, but they don't know where to start, and they have a CFO who's literally scrutinizing anything that is being recommended, and what do we do? I feel trapped. I know I fall into the same camp as Michael and Steven, but like literally, what do I do? I want to do something, but I'm fearful. Like, what recommendation and advice do you have for that people leader?
Part of what the 3 of us talked about, fellas, about just the stigma here. There's things that anybody could be doing from a leadership perspective that is free. It just is how you show up and how you sort of create the core values for your organization that really do foster a sense of inclusivity for not just your employees as employees, but your employees as caregivers. So, we always coach people leaders on, and again, it sounds obvious, but it's so much harder to do than it is to just say it out loud, is to be empathetic. Just about Steven, you said it, just about every one of the folks listening probably has a story of their own, whether it's for their own kiddos or parents or grandparents or spouses or in-laws or aunts or uncles or cousins or friends or neighbors or domestic partners or whoever it is that you're caring about. Like, think about how those stories really changed and impacted your life and your ability to work and to live. And many of those leaders probably listening also have some flexibility, maybe like the 3 of us have. And how difficult must this be for a 24-year-old who's just starting his or her career and doesn't have maybe some of this flexibility and some of these resources, and or they're having their first child, Daniel, like you're talking about, and you're trying to just figure this landscape. Like, think about what it's meant to you and multiply it by a factor of 5 or 10x in terms of the stress and anxiety it can create for your colleagues and your peers and your coworkers. And then I would also challenge everybody to, I hear you, Steven, on the CFO point, be bold and and be convicted around this issue. Acknowledge caregiving as a critical part of your employees' lives and really truly a social determinant of their own health and production levels. And take a good hard look at your well-being and benefit strategies and see if you can fill some of those inclusivity gaps with programs potentially like a Cariloop, but also there's lots of other ways that you could look to think creatively about your time away or your leave and disability practices. Just some of the, like for us here at Cariloop, we do quarterly mental health days. Giving people like that ability to just have that one day a quarter where they know they can use that day to go drive down to South Texas and go see their aunt. Like just little things like that you can begin to do that really do make it feel a bit more inclusive for you as a parent and caregiver.
Before I forget, can you tell us where people can find this top needs report? Because we barely scratched the surface. Like when I think about I only saw the first draft, which was from a month ago. I'm sure there's probably more in there, but I learned about things like Generation C. I had never heard that before, but apparently that there are all of these new caregiving needs that have come out of parents having to take care of kids that grew up during COVID. And there were some really interesting stats on that in there. And so all that to say, I found the report to be pretty insightful and just making me aware of some things that I definitely was not aware of before. And so where can people find the top needs report?
We'll have this publicly available on our website, cariloop.com. We'll make sure that there's a link that we get to you guys that you can post here with the episode so that people can go and access it and download it. And then I believe we're going to get it to you guys as well, so you can include it in your newsletter as you share this out with your audience. And I agree, Daniel, like there's a lot in here for the group, and especially even if you don't do anything related to supporting caregivers and parents, there's a lot in here just to get HR and people leaders thinking about like the way you engage your employees and just some of the things that you might consider as far as what they're going through as a result of their parenting and caregiving journeys.
Well, I love it. I mean, people leaders are looking for an edge right now. We're looking for something that is the no-brainer of delivering value to our people, improving our end product, which is the employee experience, the jobs that people are doing and how they're able to execute those jobs, and just having a total rewards background. I know I would be willing to bet 90%, probably higher, but I don't know. I'm not, this is Square-tonomics here, guys. So I'm probably way overestimating this, but a large majority of companies out there are leaving benefits dollars on the table, meaning they are paying for benefits for their employees that are not being used. They're just pissing away this money. And I got to think that there's a way to reallocate some of that budget. Like this doesn't even have to be net new cost. It's just optimization of the offerings we're providing our people. But hey, I've been out of the game for a little while, but I think going to the report and hearing the top needs and what the data is saying is a good starting point. And so with that, Michael, we have to turn the corner and start bringing this conversation to a close. We have a couple more traditions. The next one is what we call rapid fire questions. Same set of questions we ask every guest. You ready to do this?
Let's do it.
Awesome. First question. What's one piece of advice you give someone starting their career today?
Do what you say you're going to do. Do what you say you're going to do.
Love it.
That's great advice. Next question. If your team gave you a superpower nickname, what would it be?
You know, I had a little bit of a hint this question was coming, and the best that I could come up with actually with my wife this morning at breakfast was Iceman.
Ooh.
You ever seen Top Gun? Iceman? Like,
yeah,
man. Always keeps it cool-headed, balanced. Like that tends to be me. So we'll go with Iceman.
I like that. I like that a lot. If you could steal one strategy, and you're CEO, so I'm curious to hear what your answer is here. If you could steal one strategy from another company, what would it be?
So guilty as charged. Like the one that I would steal is one that we already have stolen. So hopefully that's an acceptable answer. So the pay it forward strategy used by like Tom Shoes and Bombas Socks. Like Cariloop is a B Corp. So to be able to also build into our business that like we want to pay it forward. You know, the more we grow, the more we give, just like they have a really effective strategy and one that I was dying to implement and I couldn't wait to steal it.
I feel like we're going to have to do a big like compilation post of all of the responses to this question because there have been some pretty good responses. Okay, last rapid fire question. Who do we need to have onto the show next?
So I just this past week was in Atlanta, Georgia, visiting with one of our favorite clients and one of the best HR and people and benefits leaders that we get to work with. We get to work with a lot of amazing ones, but she's certainly up there at the top. Nikki Sharp is her name. So she heads health and wellness benefits at Shaw Industries, which is one of the largest flooring companies in the world. Probably a lot of the offices you guys have walked into, they've got Shaw, floors. So I'll definitely connect you with Nikki and would love to see her come visit with you guys.
Well, with that, we are now at the final tradition of the show. We call it one word or phrase close. It's a way that as we reflect on the last hour and change that we've spent together, a nice way of wrapping things up. And again, we like our guests to go first. So if you don't mind taking us out, Michael.
The phrase that's really popular here at Cariloop, care deeply.
I'm going to go with something that somebody said in our last recording. So we had on the chief people officer from Strava, and she said that whenever she's thinking about these big decisions that she needs to make for her company, she just asks herself, like, what would a normal person do? Like, what's the common sense thing here to do? And I feel like that's a lot of what we talked about today. Like, a lot of this stuff seems like common sense, but most people aren't doing it. So what would a normal person do?
I love that guy. And that was such a great recording. It's weird. That was last week. I'm going to go with pay it forward. I think as I reflect on the conversation and I reflect on how I personally relate to this conversation and being the caregiver for my tia Benny, one of the things right as I was making the decision and consulting my fiance about taking on the responsibility, like part of my rationale was like, she's helped so many people in our family, in her life. Like, it's what I've got to do. I've got to pay this forward. Like, someone has to do it. And if the universe has brought me here, then I am going to do it. And I think that just is a perfect way to sum up, what we've been talking about today and what you've shared with us, Michael. And kudos to you and the Cariloop team for all the success. We're rooting for y'all. This is something that hits, obviously, as we've talked about, it hits close to home for us, and we're going to be rooting you on. And you're now part of the Modern People Leader family. And so hopefully, to the extent that we can have another collaboration, we would love to. This has been an absolute joy. So thank you.
Yeah, likewise, guys. Thanks so much for having me and creating the platform to have the conversation. Really appreciate it.
All right. Talk to you later. Have a good week. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Modern People Leader. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to know what you think about the show, and you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.